Welcome to B'madzaje Ginonindwa. This podcast is produced by the Communications Department at the Anishinabek Nation. We will be focusing on the issues and initiatives in Anishinabek Nation territory. I'm your host, Lisa Abel. In this episode of B'madzaje Ginonindwa, we'll be learning about Koganaawsawin. In our language, Koganaawsawin means raising up our children. Over the past several years, the Anishinabek Nation has worked tirelessly with Anishinabek communities to advance our own child well-being law and system that will help our Anishinabek children, youth, and families to thrive. The Anishinabek Nation's Child Well-Being Law was approved in principle by the Anishinabek Chiefs in Assembly at Grand Council in 2015. Another milestone was the launch of Koganaawsawin in 2019. Koganaawsawin is a collective body established by Anishinabek First Nations and Indigenous child well-being agencies to support and further enhance the delivery of child, youth, and family well-being programs and services by the First Nations and the agencies. As of November 2022, Koganaawsawin is now operating as a not-for-profit corporation and is governed by a board of 8 directors. Koganaawsawin offers 5 main areas of service for all 39 member Anishinabek First Nations: Child, Youth, and Family Services, a family well-being program, First Nation representative support, prevention, and repatriation. Through Koganaawsawin, Anishinabek citizens can also access the Office of the Children's Commissioner and the Anishinabek Nation Circle process. We will learn more about Koganaawsawin services, the Office of the Children's Commissioner, and the Anishinabek Nation Circle process later in this podcast. The foundation of Koganaawsawin's work is underpinned by the Anishinabek Nation Child Well-Being Law and the Kina Anishinaabe Binonji, the Anishinabek Children and Youth Bill of Rights. The law acknowledges, respects, and supports the primary role of parents, guardians, families, and communities in safeguarding and promoting the well-being of Anishinaabe children and youth, and can be enacted by a community at any time. The bill records the rights of Anishinabek children and youth to help ensure their well-being. This past August, Koganaawsawin hosted a quarterly Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Working Group meeting and their 2nd annual general meeting in Sault Ste. Marie. I was fortunate to meet with Stan Cloud, Director of Social Development and Koganaawsawin, who shared a background on Koganaawsawin and how this organization is dedicated to reasserting Anishinabek ways of caring for our families and communities. Today on B'madzaje Ginonindwa, I'm here with Stan Cloud, Director of Social Development and Koganaawsawin. Miigwech, Stan, for being with us here today.
Miigwech for the invite, Lisa. Appreciate it.
To start, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be working with Koganaawsawin?
Sure. My name's Stan Cloud. I'm from Kettle and Stony Point First Nation. I'm down on the shores of Lake Huron. I've been with the Anishinabek Nation going into my 8th year. I worked various roles within the social development department, then eventually in the director role. I have children, 5 boys, 3 girls, and I have 3 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. They're pretty full of energy, keep me active, keep me on my toes. And then as far as my work life, I've worked around child welfare, social services the majority of my lifetime. In varying capacities. I worked for one of our agencies, like pre-mandated agencies, they call them. So the agencies that haven't received their full designation to provide protection services. And that was Manaska Child and Family Services, and that they work out of the southwest, the London District region. And then I've actually worked for the Union of Ontario Indians in the past in a pilot project, social services reform pilot project, which was primarily focused on creating economies, sustainable economies in our First Nations, specifically targeting the population that were on social assistance. So I worked in that part of the social realm. And then I worked for another PTO as their social policy analyst and that was an Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians. I spent maybe 6-7 years there doing the exact same type of work. So I actually sat at the table of the same meetings as my predecessor, Adrian Pelche, as a social director. So I've also enjoyed this kind of work.
So it sounds like it's kind of a calling for you. It's really been a big focus of your career working in social services.
Yeah, it has been, and it was really interesting because I wasn't raised in a culture like a number of us. But later in life, I received my Anishinabek, and it's a Jono-Anaquat, which is like Southern Cloud. And to listen to the story of the elder that gave me the name, Jim Dumont, and he talked about it's an old name that was given to me, and the person that held the name was a person that would go down, like would travel, to different settlements or different tribes, different nations, and talk about, things that are going to impact him across the board. And would also be like a mediator, like bringing people together to talk about things. And I sat there and I was kind of floored because I'm like, I've been doing that for the last 15, 20 years. And I said, so it's like, that's who I am. I really embrace that. So when I go about my daily activities, I'm all mindful of that. That was my purpose. That's who I am. That's who I sit as on Turtle Island, is bringing those, our nations, like specifically with the Anishinabek Nation, together to talk about things that are going to impact us all, right? And facilitate that conversation.
So you're really bringing this cultural and spiritual grounding to your work as well.
Yes.
Well, I think that's pretty important when working in social services with our Anishinaabe communities. So to get to the idea of Koganaawsawin, can you let us know what is Koganaawsawin in general?
So in general, Koganaawsawin flows from our Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law. And there, you see a section in there that they're identified as a child wellbeing coordinating body. So that's who we are. We coordinate all the work connected to the law in our communities. But what happened is we sat with our outer Gordon Wandabenspa, and he participated in a lot of our meetings, even across the nation, all across the sectors. So what we did is we asked him, like, what is it that we're doing? So he was offered SAMA, actually in my home territory in Kettle Point, at one of our child wellbeing working group meetings. And we asked him, we're trying to find a name for what it is that we're doing. And that was in April. And then I think around November of that same year, he came back to us with a name. And that's what it was, Koganaawsawin. He expanded, like, basically it's our responsibility in how we raise up the children in the community. And as with all our teaching, like, that's just a little tiny bit of it, what Koganaawsawin is. But there's a lot more to it. And that's for us to kind of find out and build on, working with the communities to understand what is Koganaawsawin to the communities. The focus is raising up the children, but how do we do that in an Anishinaabe way?
Right.
So that's where we got our name from, and that's the work that we do.
Since 2008, the Anishinabek Nation has been engaged in initiatives to support the development of the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law. This law was drafted through a 7-year community consultation process. In 2015, the Anishinabek Nation Chiefs in Assembly approved the law in principle. To date, 22 Anishinabek First Nations have chosen to enact the law in their communities. The law confirms that First Nations have inherent jurisdiction over child well-being involving our children, regardless of their residency. It is an exercise of our jurisdiction. And as Anishinabek nations exercise our First Nations' inherent right to take care of our own children, a crucial role for Koganaawsawin is to support the implementation and application of the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law. It also supports the work of the Indigenous child welfare agencies. The objectives of the law are to ensure the safety and well-being of our children and communities, to acknowledge and respect the primary role of parents and grandparents, families, and communities in safeguarding and promoting the well-being of our children, to support parents and guardians, families, and communities in carrying out that role, to provide protection and care for our children in circumstances where their parent or guardian have not given or are unlikely to give that protection and care, to ensure that we maintain our traditions, culture, values, and language, to ensure adoptions only occur with the approval of the parent or guardian and the Anishinabek Nation community the child or youth belongs to, and to establish a legislative framework. The fundamental principles that govern the application and implementation of the law are the role of the family, treating each child or youth with respect, the best interests of the child or youth, and child or youth participation in decision-making. This law also created Koganaawsawin as the central coordinating body of the Anishinabek child, youth, and family well-being system. Through this system, Anishinabek First Nations are the lawmakers and are responsible to ensure the delivery of child and family services for Anishinabek families. The Anishinabek Nation Children's Commissioner, Duke Peltier, is responsible to oversee the implementation, compliance, and enforcement of the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law. We will be hearing from Duke Peltier in a future episode of the podcast.
Yeah, so the Child Wellbeing Law is a law that was developed by all members, like the communities that we work with. Basically, they came together because they wanted to assert their jurisdiction over child welfare in their territories through their, not the provincial process, but through their own. Because the truth is that we never did relinquish that right to provide care and protection for our children and family. So they were just reasserting that, but more formally. So they wanted to develop a law. So through probably 93 or so community engagements, that law was developed. So they brought the draft law and they worked with the steering committee and they brought it to the chiefs and assembly so they could review it and provide direction what to do with it. The coordinating body facilitated all that work, and then the chief's decision was to suggest edits, amendments. Then eventually they approved that the draft law be taken out to the communities to see who wanted to implement it. So our role was going to the communities, holding engagements at every community, providing the information on the law, what it is, what it isn't, because initially when we started, some of the Indigenous child wellbeing agencies thought the intention was for Koganaawsawin to replace them. So in Koganaawsawin has also been developed, and its foundation is prevention, not protection. That's all it's going to be there for the agencies to do, provide a protection service, and that's also entrenched in the law. But that doesn't close the door on any community to want to take on protection services. They might take on that function, but they might not be called protection services. Because again, we're trying to breathe life into how we take care of our families. So what might look like as a protection issue is just a family issue. Like historically, when there's issues with a family, they needed help. They weren't penalized. They didn't remove their children. Family just stepped in, or community stepped in to care for them. But then with the introduction of the mainstream and how they came into the communities, that all changed. So it's trying to recreate that. So part of our work too is trying to uncover some of that history. In just having conversations, informal conversations about what do you know about how we did things. Everyone has their own story. I have my own personal stories in my own family, how we took care of our family. I have those stories because they exist in every one of our communities because we had that process in place. It wasn't a formal process and it didn't have to be, right? It's just how we were as Anishinaabe people. So one of our main goals is trying to uncover that and, connect with the right people who know how to do that and are currently doing it. Like, there's still a lot of informal work that's being done out there. So it's just connecting to that to, demonstrate this is our history. We've always done it this way. And that to satisfy the province or the federal government about, like, we do have a strong history in taking care of our own families. So just let us do it. And that's our role, right? Is to get our communities in that position where they can do things how they always done things.
Okay. For someone who hasn't seen the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law, what generally is inside that law, in the text of the law?
Well, it really identifies like the roles and responsibilities of the communities and Koganaawsawin. It identifies the relationship, like what kind of commitments we have between all the people that are going to be involved. Like, say, it identifies the Children's Commissioner position, what the authorities are, responsibilities. It identifies documents that will need to be produced and signed in order to support that system. So there's some things like, if you look at like a legislation, there's similar things. There's definitions about taken in, there's definition of child, there's definitions just with all the kind of items that are contained within the law. But then it breaks down to how do we support the families, basically. So if something happens, what do we do? Again, with the community agreements, like there's a section on community agreements. It outlines what we agree as Koganaawsawin to do for the communities and what the community agrees to do with Koganaawsawin. Then one of the biggest sections that we have is the community standards, whereby the community is able to identify and dictate to their service providers what kind of services and how they will receive those services. So it's not like the province can impose themselves on our communities. The community standards will dictate how that looks. And now with the Supreme Court decision, that the First Nations do have the authority to make their own laws, which is like, we know that, right? We recognize that, and the Anishinabek Nation took the approach from the beginning that we don't need the federal government or the province to recognize that we have an authority or jurisdiction. We already know that. That comes to us from the Creator, and that's our responsibility. So we carry that forward.
So it sounds like it's very much empowering our Anishinabek First Nations, and it's really disrupting that cycle of provincial and federal governments imposing their own policies and programs on communities.
That's the goal, to get back to the way things were done in the past.
And I like too that, all these documents, they also refer to, the Nagodwe, Wangazid, Anishinaabe, and they refer to our 7 grandfather teachings, as the principles that these things are based on.
Yep, that's true, because that's where the law comes from, and that's where it's going to get its strength and really tied to our, Anishinaabe way of doing things.
That's interesting, though, because at the same time, we do have a lot of the intergenerational disruption of our families and ways of doing things. So it's a lot to get back to.
It is, and that's the discussion, right? But it has to start someplace. In our meeting today, that was really evident, because our history here is tragic in this country, and how we relate to the province and how the federal government impacted our lives. But we have to start to take those steps, no matter how big or small they are, to make sure that we get back to however long it's going to take, but back to where communities take care of themselves. And they do things the way they did them before all this other stuff happened with the child welfare system. And it's a lot. So part of that work is being really mindful that there is trauma out there. There is healing that has to take place. And it's having conversations with people who are involved in the system, because you're not going to get a true picture. You're not going to be able to build the proper supports without having those conversations to say, how did this impact you? What were you looking for? What helped, what didn't help? Just the way you just you build programs. But it's connecting with people where it's not like we know everything and we're going to build a program and you guys do it. It's got to come from the people that were impacted, right? To make sure that we create the best possible scenario for our citizens.
Koganaawsawin offers 5 main areas of service for all 39 member Anishinabek First Nations. These services are Child, Youth, and Family Services, where coordinators assist in the implementation of the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law, the development of First Nation community standards, and the establishment of an Anishinabek Child, Youth, and Family Services Committee within each Anishinabek First Nation. The Family Wellbeing Program, an early intervention program grounded in Anishinabek culture, values, language, and traditions. The program addresses the root causes of violence and trauma and reduces the overrepresentation of Anishinabek children and youth in child welfare and youth justice systems. It provides support, culturally based resources, and capacity building training. First Nation representative support is where Band Representative Liaison supports Anishinabek First Nation representatives, also known as band representatives, in their roles by providing and developing resources and training to build capacity and collaboration in child well-being and community development. First Nation representative support also stays informed on legislative changes and policy and program development by engaging in consultation with the Anishinabek Nation, federal and provincial governments, child well-being agencies, legal representatives, and other child welfare stakeholders. Prevention is where the Prevention Services Coordinator incorporates agency models and ensures implementation of the child and youth well-being community models that have been developed by Anishinabek First Nations in cooperation with their respective child well-being agency. In 2021, the Anishinabek Nation also began its prevention-focused customary care program, subsidizing customary care cases where a child or youth would benefit from an alternative caregiving arrangement before any protection concerns arise. And Repatriation, to support and promote the development of connections for Anishinabek children and youth that have been separated from their family and community as a result of child welfare involvement or adoption. This includes advocacy and support, referrals, service development and support, assistance with reunification, and connection to culture. Through Koganaawsawin, Anishinabek citizens can also access the Office of the Children's Commissioner and the Anishinabek Nation Circle process. The Anishinabek Nation Children's Commissioner serves as an independent voice for Anishinabek children and youth, advocating for their best interests, rights, and well-being. The Commissioner also provides high-level oversight over the implementation, compliance, and enforcement of the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law and the Anishinabek Children and Youth Bill of Rights. The Anishinabek Nation Circle process is a culturally based, voluntary, child-centered, confidential circle providing Anishinabek First Nation families with the support needed to create a plan that addresses child and youth well-being issues. The circle process can be accessed at any step of the care process. It utilizes the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Law and supports Anishinabek families that are involved in or at risk of becoming involved in child protection matters.
So as far as services with Koganaawsawin, we do the high-level advocacy. So what we do is when we meet with our member communities and specifically our child wellbeing working group, like the meeting that's going on this week, is we get information from them. So that forum allows them to bring forward concerns, identify gaps in service. So that's what we do. Like we try to support those, filling in those gaps. So what we're doing is we're create like a program to pilot it and to build something that the communities can then take and use it for their own in their community, but of course tweaking it to whatever suits their needs. So that's kind of we don't really deliver service, but we help communities build services that are needed and are not currently available, or of course advocating for more resources for existing services.
You're saying that Koganaawsawin is just supporting First Nations in however way they want to deliver these kind of services to their community members.
Yep. So we're help coordinate their activities, like similar to just a high level. We're coordinate say if there's training that they require across the board, we're help coordinate that kind of training. Service delivery will be specific to the communities, but we will be receiving like a general group of services that the communities will be able to deliver. And Koganaawsawin would just be the higher level advocacy group and coordinating body for the communities.
So how is this idea of Koganaawsawin different than the way child welfare services have been offered previously?
Well, for one, it's intended to be culturally based and based on the culture and traditions of the communities that work within it. So we have member nations under Koganaawsawin, and each community will have its own specific and distinct way of providing the service. There may be things that are more prevalent in the south and the north. Like in the north, I can say that there's a lot more activity around harvesting than down in the south. So there might be more incorporation of those type of traditional activities. Not to say that they don't exist down south, but there may be a higher prevalence. The protocols around your ceremonies may be a little different, probably not significantly different, but there may be some difference there. And then the other thing is that we're not really deficit based. Well, we're not at all. Like the provincial system highlights, they focus on the deficits and what's wrong with the family, where we want to elevate what's right with the family and give life back to the way that we cared for our children. And we say that, and the communities can talk to each other, and they understand when I say, we want to care for the spirit of the child. Where if you say that in a mainstream or provincial setting, they won't understand that because it's an abstract thought. Where we understand, that children are a gift from the Creator, and they select, their parents before they come here, so they know their path when they're entering. That would be, I think, the significant difference. Like even if you look at the language, the province also talks about, okay, we're meeting the minimum standards. So for us, you'd say, well, we don't want the least amount of service or the least help for our families. So we don't look at minimum standards. We want what is the best that we can do and provide for the children, and that's our objective. And that means that they know who they are as Anishinaabe people, and they understand what that means. They understand that connection to land, and they're also not only understand it, but they are connected with that land. They understand how to caretake in a good way, like how to harvest in a good way, how to just relate to creation in general, that we're supposed to as Anishinaabe people. So that would be the focus on helping our children, that strong foundation to be able to then go out into that mainstream and just participate, right? Just be who they are and know who they are and thrive out there. Or even more within the territory too.
Yeah, and all Anishinaabe children and families need that for sure. So how does Koganaawsawin work with the Office of the Children's Commissioner?
So the Office of the Children's Commissioner is the kind of the advocate for the child within the law. So we provide support to that office because we're constantly getting messages for assistance from communities on a number of different things. Could be getting adoptions recognized. That's one of the larger items that we're working on. It could be a number of things like receiving poor service from an agency. It could be something that maybe a policy or a procedure that doesn't work for families, and it doesn't work for Anishinaabe families. So if that's enough of an issue, then we toss the ball to our Children's Commissioner to work with our leadership and carry that forward, right, to resolve that issue for our family and children. But yeah, it's a variety of things. It's just like wherever our families feel powerless or they've kind of hit the wall and they can't successfully advocate for themselves anymore, they may reach out to us at Koganaawsawin or the Children's Commissioner to assist them.
Oh, okay, that's good. What about, I heard that there's an Anishinabek Nation circle process. How does that work?
Yeah, so the circle process is the same thing. It was developed by Anishinaabe citizens, developed through a child wellbeing working group. And we put it together to eliminate the barriers that our family faced that were in the child welfare court system, where they really didn't have access to something that was their own, that was Anishinaabe. You could, if you look into it, all Indigenous populations have that type of circular method of resolving issues, of conducting their governance. So we had that in Turtle Island already, but because we're Anishinaabe, the province never recognized that we had that. That's basically what it's built on, is that it's put in place to help our families who are involved in child protection to have something that's familiar to them, something that's based on their own teachings and culture, that involves an elder's guidance and involves family. It's in the communities. It involves ceremony. That's what it is. It's something that's, they're recognized.
So what are the next steps for Koganaawsawin?
The next steps are just building the policies and procedures that communities will need to implement their legislation further, to develop their structure, like their governing structure, in order to implement those services and the law. Those are next steps, just working on that. And we continually give the presentations to the communities to try and encourage them to sign on to the law continuously.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about Koganaawsawin?
It's just continually moving and growing and trying to get their work done.
Like every project, for sure.
Yes.
Well, miigwech, Stan, thank you for explaining this to us. Miigwech.
Miigwech for having me.
Miigwech to our guest, Stan Cloud. As Koganaawsawin moves forward in their work, the Anishinabek Nation Child Wellbeing Negotiations Team is continuing to negotiate with the provincial and federal governments in the area of child, youth, and family well-being. They are currently in the process of negotiating a collaborative self-government agreement and separate supporting funding agreements with the Province of Ontario and the Government of Canada. In June of 2021, Canada and the Anishinabek Nation also signed an agreement in principle on Anishinabek child, youth, and family well-being that supports the Anishinabek Nation in creating its own system and delivering the programs and services required to keep Anishinabek children within Anishinabek families and communities. For more information on Koganaawsawin, visit their website at koganaawsawin.ca. Find a link in the podcast description. This episode includes the tracks Brothers by Wolf Saga and Chippewa Travelers, Hard Beginnings by Grace and Grit, Thoughts Will Wander by Justin Delorme, and Waking State by Jacob Hoskins, licensed through Nagamo Publishing. Miigwech for listening to this episode of Bamadzajig Ganonendwa. Until next time, Bama P.